Okay. I believe the piano was your first instrument of choice as a young girl. Tell us about that and how and when the guitar came into the picture.
Well, my parents bought a piano when I was 5. I grew up in Japan. They were missionaries, and they sang these high-pitched hymns every morning, and they had to have a piano to do it. And so every afternoon I would go in when nobody was around and play the piano myself and make up songs and play what I heard on the radio, which was Ray Charles and Fats Domino and Professor Longhair. So I played my little version of rock and roll, I guess, and just kind of went on from there. And then when we came to the States, when I graduated from high school, the same year my father retired, we moved to Georgia, where the mission was based at that point. And we didn't have a piano. Then I started college in Tennessee, and there was a piano in the boys' dorm, so I played that one. And there was a girl in the dorm who had a guitar, and I borrowed that, and I left the college after I did a whole year and a summer school in one semester, and then went back to Atlanta and went to art school, and I bought a guitar, and 2 weeks later I got my first job. So you can tell I was obviously not hired as a guitar player in the beginning.
Growing up in Japan, how much exposure did you get to the music that ultimately inspired you?
Well, rhythm and blues was huge on the radio. New Orleans rhythm and blues was huge on the radio in Japan. And then I listened to some country music on the Armed Forces radio station. The Grand Ole Opry was on every Saturday night, I think it was. And then I listened to Japanese classical music and Japanese folk music. And then the school that I went to was a Canadian school, so most of our classes were in English, but it was 200 students from kindergarten through grade 12 and 28 nationalities. So I was exposed to world music before it was called world music.
Uh-huh.
So I grew up listening to all different types of music, and I think it all went in there. All ended up inside of me.
Now you were at the Greenwich Village club scene there in the 60s, which must have been an exciting place to be at that time. Who were some of your contemporaries there?
It was 1966, and I went to New York, and I played for 6 months at a place called the Cafe Au Go-Go, and I opened for everybody from Muddy Waters to Buddy Guy and Junior Wells to Big Joe Williams to Richard Pryor to gosh, I'm trying to think of who else. Everybody. I mean, I always go blank when I try to think of Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, a lot of the blues people. And one of the people that I met that was there for a while and sort of became friends with was Jimi Hendrix. He was the guitar player in a group that backed up John Hammond. And at that point, the group was called Jimmy James and the Blue Flames. And he introduced me to Chaz Chandler, who came to hear him, and he said that Chaz Chandler wanted him to go and not the group, just him, and he said he was feeling guilty, but he was going to go for it and stuff like that. You know, I watched him write The Wind Cries Mary, all that wind noise that ends up in Third Stone from the Sun started out in The Wind Cries Mary, and he did it with just his Stratocaster and a twin reverb, but it became too heavy, like The Wind Cries Mary turned into a ballad, and those wind sounds divided off into that Third Stone from the Sun.
Was Jimmy's star potential obvious to you right then at that early stage?
He wasn't like anybody else, and he blew everybody away. He blew the musicians away. The audiences didn't know what to think, and I think he really did have to go to England to make it, because even though we were in New York, it took me years to figure it out, but there was a funny vibe. When he and I would play together on stage, there was a funny vibe from the audience. And of course, I never thought about it until probably 10 years later, that it was they were looking at a black man and a white woman.
Oh.
Even in New York, even in Greenwich Village. You know, so he really did have to go to England.
Yeah.
And you know, the blues went to England first and then was brought back to the United States by people like Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck and John Mayall and all those people. So it was reintroduced, you know, and then they discovered, in the States, they discovered B.B. King and all the people who've been there all along.
Looking back now, how important do you rate that period of time in Greenwich Village for you in terms of your development as a stage performer?
I was barely wet. I was still wet behind the ears. I think it's been years of experience that helped me the most. But I think it's also people like Willie Dixon and Howlin' Wolf were so supportive of young people coming up. Odetta was wonderful, and still is. Very supportive of young people coming up. So it makes a difference when you look ahead and you see who you're coming up behind, and they turn around and help you and try to support you and tell you to go for it. And it's really a wonderful thing.
Now, I guess it's your slide playing that people most associate with you. At what point do you feel you developed your own particular style of playing there?
Well, probably right away. It's probably gotten more complicated over the years, but it's still the same type of thing, like the rhythm and blues feel in Toehold on that first album, and the We the People, that tune I wrote that sounds like a raga. All those elements are still there, but I did start playing electric guitar in about 1978. Guild gave me an electric, and I started playing more electric in a power trio, so that was a real leap forward too. But I think the style has always been there, because the roots are there. I stick pretty close to my roots. And I think some people relate to the voice and some people relate to the guitar. So I don't know if it's either one or the other. I think it's probably both.
You have a long association with Guild guitars. What is it about them that first attracted you and made them the right guitar for you? Well, I like the neck. Yeah. It's not a hard neck to get your fingers around, and they have a lot of low end. The acoustic has a whole lot of low end, and the electrics, the neck goes right down all the way through the body, so they don't get knocked out of tune, and they're not all delicate and fussy and everything. And I used to go to the factory when I lived in Connecticut. I used to go down to Rhode Island to the Guild factory, which is now condos, I hear. But I used to go down there, and the fellow who built these guitars in the 60s and into the 70s was from Romania, and he was a real expert luthier. I mean, he was a really wonderful guitar maker. So they're just really good, that whole series. And then, of course, before me, there were the jazz players who liked the guitars with the F-holes in them. I don't know the model number, but Guilds always have a great big sound. My guitar is a smaller guitar, my acoustic, but it has a great big sound with a lot of low end. I believe there was one particular acoustic you had. I don't know whether you still have it. That had quite a history to it.
That's the only one I've ever had.
Really?
It was the Loner that I bought from Guild for $50. Patrick Sky actually arranged to get it for me. He's the person who took me to New York. And he paid $50 for it, and I paid him back. And it was the Loner that they sent people when they were getting their guitars repaired. So everybody from Mississippi John Hurt to Richie Havens to whoever else played Guilds at that time has played that guitar, for short periods of time. But it's the only one I've ever had, and it's coming up on, I guess it's 42 years now I've been playing it.
Wow. It'd be worth a lot more than that $50 now, I'd say.
Well, the finish is gone, and it's got lots of nicks and repaired cracks, and it's really taken, it's been with me through everything. So I don't know what it wouldn't certainly, I always feel funny when I get on stage with people who have these shiny new things. I don't, it's not like that. But the good thing about this guitar is it has no idea that there are any rules for a six-string guitar. It doesn't think that it has to sound like a European instrument. It can sound like a saz. It can sound like a vena. It can sound like anything. And part of that is that I use a slide and tunings. And I think the reason I do all that is, especially the tunings and the playing slide like that, is growing up in Japan and listening to shamisen music. It just never occurred to me that you have to tune it, My Dog Has Fleas.
Over the years, you've, as well as your own material, you've chosen some wonderful songs to cover and interpret in your own way. What do you look for in a song to make it one that you'd want to take on?
Is there a criteria?
Well, sometimes, there's certain artists I pay more attention to that I listen to a great deal, like Jimi Hendrix. I listen to a lot of his stuff, and I would never want to do a song the way the person already did it. If I feel like I can add something to it or change it around, then I would do it. My favorite story about John Lee Hooker is that I asked him if he was going to be there for my set, and he said yes. This was in 1980 in a club in Ohio, and it was the first time I met him, and I opened for him, and he said he would be there, and I said, good, because I'm going to do one of your songs. So I did my set, and then I came back, and the name of the song is Crawling King Snake, but it's totally different from the way he did it, and I came back, and he was there, and I said, so what did you think? And he said, which one was it? So you can see how much I changed it around. And if you listen on that album to my version, or any time I've recorded it, to my version of Crawling King Snake, and then listen to his original version, they're like totally different.
Yeah, chalk and cheese.
But they are the same tune.
One of our most loved performers down here is Margaret Rodenite, and I know you've had a long association with Margaret. She's been involved in your Australian visits. How did you first come in contact with her?
She wrote me letters in the 70s and said she was a fan and she wanted to do one of my tunes and everything. And then she put a group together called Honky Tonk Angels in the 80s, and they called their company that, and they brought me over for 2 different tours. And then she brought me over again. It was about 3, maybe 4 years. Gosh, it's longer than that now. It must have been 2002. She brought me over and arranged for a tour, and she opened for me, and we went all over Australia on the East Coast, up and down the East Coast, and then we did New Zealand as well, and had just a blast.
Now, I was just reading, I believe you had hip replacement surgery not too long ago.
I did. In 2003, I had my right hip, and in 2004, I had my left hip, and it's 35 years of carrying amps that weigh more than most people. And arthritis combined, and thank God that's where it went and not my hands. But I just went for x-rays and a checkup, and everything is just as perfect as the day he put them in, he said. So
fantastic. So how is that?
I'm doing really well. Pardon?
How has that changed things for you?
It hasn't. I mean, it changed before when I was in terrible pain and walking with a cane and couldn't carry anything, and everything just was so much. It was very painful. And once you have it done and they heal up, it's like you never had a problem.
Yeah.
I can do anything anybody else can do now.
Was it painful?
Wonderful.
Was it painful when performing on stage?
I was in pain all the time before it was done.
Wow.
Your bone is deteriorating. Your joints you have no more cartilage. Your bones are grinding on each other. In my right hip, I had osteonecrosis, which means part of the bone died. I mean, I can't tell you the pain. I cannot. I hope you never experience it. But once you heal up from the surgery, it's like you never had a problem.
Fantastic.
It takes a while to get over the stiffness, and your body has to get used to walking properly again and everything, and then you're good to go.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. Now let's talk about the most recent album, Mystic Bridge.
Yes.
Where was the concept of that album born?
Well, I started when I went to New Zealand and Australia. I took my acoustic because Margaret and I were going to do just acoustic, like solo shows, and I couldn't carry a bunch of stuff and an amp, and I still hadn't had the surgery, so it was quite painful to walk. So I just took the acoustic, and then when I started playing more and more acoustic again, I discovered that I really had a lot more to say on the acoustic, and when I came back from that tour, I started looking around for a tabla player because I thought that would go perfectly, and of course there's a lot of guys who play tabla, but that's not the same thing as a real classically trained, in Indian classical music, tabla player. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to find a guy who's just a sweetheart of a guy who lives in Alberta. He's moving now to British Columbia, probably because it's better. There's more opportunities closer to the Pacific Rim for world music for him, his own group. But he and I started playing together. We just sat in, and a lot of it is improvising, and he is a genius at adapting his training. He's been training since he's 8
and he grew up in Canada, so he's been listening to R&B and all that type of music. And the really funny part is I'm the same age as his dad, and his dad had my album called We the People with that raga tune on it called We the People.
Mm-hmm.
And when Cassius was growing up, he listened to it and he thought, that would sound great if it had tablas on it. And so we re-recorded it for the album and put tablas. He does it. And he even did some qawwali-type hand clapping and singing on it.
That's amazing. So his classical background wasn't a hindrance at all? He was able to adapt so easily?
No, not at all. And he's so adaptable. He's just really a brilliant player. And he learned also, he's a vocalist. And he's probably the only person in the world anybody's ever heard of that can sing and play tabla at the same time, because tablas are very, very complex and take a lot of concentration. And he can do that while and accompany himself while he sings in Urdu. So it's quite amazing.
Yeah.
And we just have a blast playing together. We played together last night here in Calgary. There's a thing called the Junos, which is like the Canadian Grammys, and they have things going on at all different venues for the whole week. And last night we played together at a venue here called Cantos. So it was quite fun.
This is the first album on your own label. Do you think you would have been able to take on a project like this with another label, or do you think having your own label gave you the freedom to do that?
I was tired of trying to convince other people that I had a good idea. And I have to tell you, I put out 2 albums on a German label, and there's the one with Taj Mahal called Spontaneous Combustion is a good album, and we're having an argument over who owes who money. They made some deals without telling me and didn't give me any accounting of anything, and they say I owe them for CDs that I didn't pay for, which I didn't pay for because they didn't give me an accounting, and it goes around and around. And they have decided no longer to manufacture those albums, and I'm not going to put myself in a position like that again. I'm going to own my masters. I have been talking to Universal for the We the People and Honky Tonk Angel albums, which are now out on a CD called Up from the Skies, The Polydor Years, because they've stopped manufacturing it. I just tried to order some more, and they've stopped manufacturing it, but they have agreed. They won't sell me the masters, but they will manufacture it exclusively for me, 500 at a time, so in small quantities that I can afford, and sell it to me for a few dollars each, and I can still sell them at my shows and from my website.
Oh, good.
So that's, it's a fair compromise to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't think they have the right to just shut it off and not put it out at all. Then I can understand why people bootleg their own albums.
Do you wish this is something that you'd done years ago, establishing your own label?
I don't think I could have. I really didn't have the experience on how to do it, and I don't think I can do it because I have the internet. I wouldn't have been able to, when the only distribution was controlled by a few huge companies, you were up the creek without a paddle.
Yeah. Yeah, the internet has changed a lot, has changed a lot of things.
It has.
Now, the songs you chose to cover on this album, such as Al Green's Take Me to the River, and there's a John Lee Hooker song there as well, and a Hendrix tune. Did you go into the studio with specific arrangements in mind for these, or did they just unfold during the recording process?
I never mess around in the studio. We've been playing them live for about 3 years, and we went in and recorded them. And we did it on spec, so it's a little bit uneven because we did it when the studio had time to take us. So some days, it changes the sound quality on some of the tunes. But other than that, and then we mixed it at a different place in Penticton, down in BC. You can see all that on the album. But we already knew the tunes. We would just go in and do it. Most of them we got by the second or third take.
Has the material being received in a live situation to audiences that may not have heard it yet?
Has the material what?
How is it being received by audiences in a live situation?
Oh, they go crazy. They love it. And it's really fun when I take Cassius with me. Then it becomes even more than just myself by myself. When I play solo, I've started taking my electric and renting an amp so that they get electric and acoustic. And then when I play solo with Cassius, then it's tablas and the acoustic, only the acoustic. So it's quite varied, but you still get everything. I mean, it's still me. I'm playing all the stuff I play.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it, and I bought myself one of those loop stations, so now I think I'm going to try to play a bass line and then overlay my guitar, and we'll see what happens. I just want to experiment with it.
Your focus does seem to have returned a little bit to acoustic guitar in recent years. Was there a particular catalyst for that?
Just because when I started traveling with Margaret, I only took the acoustic because we were going to do acoustic shows, solo shows, and I just started discovering it again. But I still do both.
Now that you've got the freedom of your own label and you've got this wonderful project out there, are there any other particular styles of albums that you've been harbouring ambitions to do for a long time that you now think you might tackle?
Well, I'll see what develops in the next few months, and if I come up with some material, the material will show me where to go with it. But yeah, I would be into making another album, and of course I'll be distributing the Up From the Skies one. So yeah.
Fantastic. And just before I let you go, Ellen, what else is in your books for the rest of 2008?
Well, I'm doing some festivals in the summer and into the fall, and then I'm hoping to, if I can get everything sent out, I think I have to send it as of July. I'm going to try to send everything to the Australian festivals, and any help you can give me on that front, I'll take, so that I can take myself and Cassius over there.
Oh, fantastic.
That's what I'd like to do, and tour over there.
Yeah, well, our festival season is just drawing to a close now, and that would fit in beautifully with that. Around this time next year would be fantastic, yeah.
I'd love to do that,
Tremendous. I might see if I can round up some contact information for you and email it to you.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks again, Ellen.
Thank you.
Been wonderful catching up with you, and congratulations on years and years and years of wonderful music, and we're sure plenty more to come.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay. We'll keep our fingers crossed we see you down here for festival season next year. That'll be fantastic.
Okay. Take care.
And you. All the best.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.